Hello, welcome to another episode of The Walking Classroom. My name is Trinity, and I'm joined by Amelia and our real-life teacher, Miss Fenn. Remember that as you are walking, only one ear should be covered with an earbud or headphone. Be sure to stay aware of your surroundings and stay with your group. Keep a quick pace so you can get the full benefits of your walk.
You know, Trin, there are many ways that you can get exercise that are so fun, they don't even seem like work. You can go for a bike ride or walk your dog. 30 minutes a day is all it takes. You can even play a game outside with a friend or your brother and sister. It all counts.
Sometimes I play baseball with the kids in my neighborhood. It's always fun until the ball rolls under our deck. Somehow, I always end up with the job of climbing under there and get it back.
I love to play baseball. My dad took us to a game last weekend, which was a blast, except that my sister sang the Star-Spangled Banner at the top of her lungs. It was so annoying. Her singing voice sounds like somebody is squeezing a cat. Unfortunately, she thinks she is really talented.
Still, it must have been pretty cool to hear that song after we talked about it in class. Just think if you wrote a national anthem, something that millions of people would sing hundreds of years later. That's talent.
You know, Miss Fenn, I was wondering, what's the difference between a song and an anthem? Is that just a fancy word?
Good question. By definition, an anthem is a song that celebrates something or that shows patriotism. But when it's a national anthem, there's a special significance to that. Only a government body can give a song such a designation. The American Congress proclaimed the Star-Spangled Banner as our national anthem in 1931.
1931? But I thought you told us the Star-Spangled Banner was written by Francis Scott Key in 1814.
Hey, I thought you were bad with remembering dates. Good job.
Thanks. It was right after the War of 1812 began. That's not too hard to remember. What happened, Miss Fenn? Why did it take so long for the song to become our national anthem?
Well, remember that Francis Scott Key was not a songwriter. He was a lawyer, and he liked to write poetry. The Star-Spangled Banner was a poem he was inspired to write after he witnessed the British attack of Fort McHenry.
And you know, the entire Star-Spangled Banner anthem and the poem it was based on has 4 verses, but usually only the first verse is sung at ball games. Oh, and the poem wasn't even called the Star-Spangled Banner at first. It was called In Defense of Fort McHenry.
Not exactly a snappy title, is it? I think the new one is better. So you're saying that Francis Scott Key wrote the poem that eventually became the words of the song, or what's known as the lyrics. Someone else must have written the actual music.
Right, Amelia. The poem was eventually set to music written by English composer John Stafford Smith, but that didn't happen right away. Once it did, the song became very popular and was our unofficial national anthem for another 100 years.
My dad and I talked about this when we were at the baseball game. He said that the Star-Spangled Banner became even more regarded as our national anthem during the World Series in 1917. It was sung in honor of the soldiers who were fighting in World War I. Everyone was so inspired by it that they began singing the song at all baseball games.
And it still took the government another 14 years to make it official? Sometimes I think they need to put kids in charge. We get stuff done much quicker.
Who knows? Maybe they were considering other songs.
There were many famous patriotic songs at the time, but it's hard to dismiss the significance of the Star-Spangled Banner. The words in the song symbolize much of what makes our country great. And just think about the circumstances under which Mr. Key wrote that song in the first place. Actually, wrote the poem in the first place.
He was a very brave man, and I don't think everybody thinks about the whole story when they hear our national anthem.
Okay. Why don't you two show me how well you were listening in class and tell everybody about it?
And I'll fill in when you forget something.
Gee, thanks for the vote of confidence.
That's what I'm here for.
Well, it all started 2 years into the War of 1812 in the summer of 1814 when the British burned the buildings in Washington, D.C. This included the White House and the Capitol building. The British thought that burning the nation's capital would be demoralizing to the American people. The flames were so high they could be seen 40 miles away in Baltimore. That's hard to imagine. Not to mention the idea of the White House being burned down. The British were serious about causing some damage.
Sometimes the War of 1812 is called the Second War of Independence. We had already won our independence in the Revolutionary War, but the British were still slapping us around. The United States of America was a new nation, and they still wanted to control us. They were basically just a big bully.
Right, and the British would have loved to take control of their former colonies. They weren't going to just go away. The United States was growing, and England wanted the new Western territories, and they certainly didn't want the United States to claim it as theirs. So after they burned Washington, England's Royal Navy sailed toward Baltimore. They had tried to take Baltimore by land battle, but failed, so they decided to attack the city and Fort McHenry from the water.
That's where Francis Scott Key comes to the story. He and Colonel John Skinner were sent on to one of the British ships to negotiate for the release of an elderly American doctor named William Beans. Beans was from Baltimore, and the people of his town were very upset that he'd been captured during the attacks on Washington. Everyone was worried that Dr. Beans would be hanged by the British.
My goodness, you two really were paying attention. Remember that Mr. Key was a lawyer and Colonel Skinner was an expert in prisoner exchanges. They were both highly trained in the art of negotiation, which is why President Madison sent them.
When you say negotiation, do you mean like when I trade my peanut butter sandwich for a ham sandwich in the lunchroom?
Sort of like that. That would be an example of a simple negotiation. But yes, it's a form of trading or bargaining. When two sides each have something that the other one wants, they negotiate and try to make a deal.
Francis Scott Key and Colonel Skinner were hoping the British would return Dr. Beans in exchange for some British prisoners at a later date. At first, the British refused to release him, but Key and Skinner showed them some letters written by injured British prisoners. They wrote of the great medical care they got from the Americans, including Dr. Beans. Unfortunately, the negotiation didn't go the way Francis Scott Key had hoped. Even after the British had agreed to release the doctor, they wouldn't let the Americans off the ship because the British were about to attack Fort McHenry, and they didn't want Mr. Key or the Colonel to have a chance to alert anyone.
Just think how scared the three Americans must have been to sit on that ship all night and watch as the British bombed our fort. It was pitch black out, and the only times they could see what was happening was when a bomb went off and lit up the sky. I'm sure it was noisy too. And remember, the Americans were fighting back. We had anticipated the attack after the burning of Washington. The bombs and rockets from the Americans could have sunk the ship that Francis Scott Key, Colonel Skinner, and Dr. Beans were on. It must have been terrifying.
You're right. I'm sure it was terribly scary. But in a weird way, we're lucky that they had that experience because it was also so inspirational. The words that Francis Scott Key wrote express his fears as he witnessed the bombardment throughout the night. They also express the joy that he and all Baltimore citizens must have felt as dawn arrived and the American flag was still there, waving proudly over Fort McHenry, even when it was tattered and full of holes. It meant that the fort had not surrendered. Once the shelling had stopped, the Americans knew that the British had abandoned their attack.
Let's talk about the flag that was flying over Fort McHenry.
The song is called the Star-Spangled Banner, after all.
A young woman named Mary Pickersgill made the flag. She was an experienced maker of ship's colors and signal flags. The flag that became the Star-Spangled Banner was 30 feet by 42 feet.
That's bigger than our classroom.
Whoa, that's huge. Wasn't it so big that Mary Pickersgill had to use the floor of a brewery to work on it?
Yes, and she and the people who helped her stitched it all by hand. There are 15 stars on the flag, and each of them is 2 feet across from point to point. There were 8 red and 7 white stripes, each also 2 feet wide. The Star-Spangled Banner was made from 400 yards of the best quality wool fabric.
I remember reading that 3 of the women who worked on it were only 13 years old, including Mary Pickersgill's daughter, Caroline. Her elderly mother worked on it too, and they had to do most of the sewing on their knees. It took them 7 weeks to make that flag and another smaller flag for Fort McHenry.
My mom always complains about sewing, but she never made anything that big, and at least she has a sewing machine. Mary's fingers must have been really tired when she finished. Why did they make it so big in the first place?
That was decided in the summer of 1813. The commander of Fort McHenry, Major George Armstead, asked for a flag so big that the British would have no trouble seeing it from a distance. He did not want the British to mistake where the fort was.
It's like he was saying that we weren't afraid of the British. If they wanted to attack us, they should go right ahead, because we were going to fight back. Having a flag that big also made it easier for the citizens of Baltimore to see that the Americans still had control of the fort.
Yes, and it worked, because we fought back and the flag made it through the battle. It's all right there in the poem. Oh, say can you see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming.
That talks about how he saw the flag before the sun went down that night and the battle started. He was excited and surprised to see it the next morning. Then it says, whose broad stripes and bright stars, through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we'd watched, were so gallantly streaming.
That describes what it was like to see the flag during the bombardment, how it was dark and you could only see what was happening when the bombs exploded. The next line says more. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there.
And then he finishes with the part that my sister sings at the top of her lungs. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave? That's also the part that people get really excited about at baseball games. There's always lots of cheering after that.
Yep, lots of people cheer at sporting events after the national anthem is sung. And there's actually a bit of debate about whether or not cheering is appropriate. Some people think it's rude to cheer after the anthem because the song is a tribute to our country and what we believe in, and that it should be respected and not treated like some college game fight song. Other people feel just the opposite, that cheering after the national anthem during a sporting event is actually cheering for America and all the great things it stands for. Either way, there are specific rules about what people should do while the Star-Spangled Banner is being sung. As a sign of respect, everybody should stand and face the flag and place their right hand over their heart while they sing. If someone is wearing a hat, he or she should remove it and hold it at their left shoulder with their right hand, so the right hand can still be placed over the heart.
Good to know. Thanks. Whatever happened to the flag of Fort McHenry? Did anybody save it?
The Star-Spangled Banner flag actually now hangs in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. The fabric is incredibly fragile.
It did go through a battle almost 200 years ago.
A friend of mine was there and saw it being restored in the late 1990s. It was laid out so that the workers, called conservators, could lie on their stomachs on a special moving bridge suspended above it to work on it. Otherwise, the flag is so big that you'd have to walk on it to work on it. It's so delicate that after it was rehung, an opaque curtain shields it from almost all light and dust. The flag is exposed for viewing for only a few moments once every hour during the museum hours.
That would be so cool to see someday, especially knowing the history behind it. That's one famous flag.
More famous than my sister will ever be. Whatever happened to Francis Scott Key? Did he ever write any other poems or songs?
He never wrote any other songs. He really considered himself to be a poet. A book of his poems was published in 1857, but sadly, that was 14 years after he died. He did have a full life, though. He became the district attorney for the District of Columbia. He and his wife, Mary, had 11 children.
11 kids? I don't even want to think about dinner time at their house. There was probably a lot of fighting over the last dinner roll.
I'm guessing those kids were just as good as negotiating as their dad. So do we think we truly understand the significance of the Star-Spangled Banner? I want to hear what you two have to say about it.
I think the significance is that the song wasn't just written by someone who sat down at a desk and decided to write a song. Francis Scott Key experienced an epic battle. His life was at risk, and he knew what it was like to be scared and have to be brave for your own country. He knew what it was like to be proud of your country for fighting back and standing for what you believe in. What do you think?
I also think it's significant because the War of 1812 was sort of the first real test the United States had as its own country. The Revolutionary War made us independent, but the United States still had to prove that it could be a strong country.
That's right. Who knew if we could come together and fight against an invasion? The War of 1812 proved that we could do it, that we weren't just a loose collection of states. The United States was a real country.
It's too bad Francis Scott Key isn't around to see how much people love his song.
We could have taken him to a baseball game. He could sit next to my sister. He might like how enthusiastically she sings his song. I hope everyone enjoyed our presentation, and we hope you had an awesome time on your walk. Remember everything we talked about the next time you're at a sporting event or hear the national anthem. Don't forget to sing along.
Or put together your own sporting event or backyard game and sing the national anthem before it. You can incorporate some exercise and American history all in one activity.
So, girls, do you think that we should sing the song?
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, ready?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we'd watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
And you know what, guys? I think that we sounded a lot better than my sister. But anyways, as always,
Happy trails!